Sports Talk Chicago. Here for Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a host on Fox Sports Radio, the founder of SwollenDome.com, and the host of the I Want Your Flex podcast. Please welcome Mike Harmon to the program. Mike, it's great to have you on. How are you?
It's good to be back. I see all the luminaries, Chicago legends that pass through here, hopefully partially as worthy the out-of-town perspective, but still the heart back in Chicago. Although you guys got snow yesterday. I was walking on a beach.
I had to drive in that snow, Mike. That was kind of BS. You know, we're sitting here April, and we're getting snow here.
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons that, well, I don't know. You guys are taxed crazy. I mean, you know, and as are we. But it's one of the reasons that I pay into this, you know, California world is because of the weather, right? So I guess I avoid that a little bit. But I do get to share these same traffic snarls. No question about that. But, yeah, I miss seasonality. I got to be honest.
Really? Why?
Just there's a passage of time that way, right? Where you kind of recognize. Now, obviously, the fact that it's drifted into late April is problematic, but the idea that you go 6 months out of the year where there's really no variation, right? Unless you're out late and you know it'll get a little chilly, as they call it here in Southern California, which means you know it's going to be in the upper 50s, but. Look, I literally just booked for my birthday weekend in October. Ringo Starr's bringing his band to an outdoor venue, the Greek Theater, right? Get them to the Greek, the famous place. I mean, that's mid-October, and I'm able to say with pretty good certainty they won't get rained out. That's pretty cool.
But do you miss the seasonality at all? Like, do you get soft, I should say? Do you get soft now because you're in California, you're not in Chicago anymore experiencing this cold weather?
No, that is true. So, like, if I'm out late and the temperature does dip, because occasionally, depending on where you are, I mean, obviously it's a big state, you know, you got the mountains or whatever else. The knees start barking. Those old injuries and old age and wrestling with the kids and all those little cracks, they show up. So sometimes you'll see me walking around town with the second pair of sweatpants on or something. Like, you look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. It's like, knees are hurting, and we still have work to do. So, yeah, it's interesting. But, yeah, you know, paying attention, obviously, weather delays and cancellations or whatever affecting our sporting world. But the fact that we're into a new season while a basketball team is still playing is just odd to me.
Yeah, the White Sox were delayed yesterday. What's your take on how they've looked so far, though, overall?
Well, 6-3. I mean, you'll take it. It's like anything. You got to weather the storms. You get a great day one out of Lucas, and he goes out with the injury. You have Pollock, who has 3 hits. Obviously, opening day, I took a lot of incoming on my show at night on Fox Sports Radio after that one, because we do needle each other, right? Jason Smith, my co-host, he's a Mets fan, so when things go awry, as they have historically with his bullpen, right? Starting pitching for him has been pretty nice for the decade, almost a decade already, that he and I have been doing the show. But for me, you know, he likes to poke and prod, and when a fly ball that looks like it's going to send you to extra innings becomes a game-losing proposition, it's a problem. But, of course, he gets hurt. So, like, right now, it's all right, feel it out. Obviously, Robert will have more success as the season goes on, but the fact that they're active on the base paths in 2022 is exciting to me, right? That's get them on, get them over, get them in. We always used to hear it from Ed Farmer on the broadcasts as we think of Ed, you know, at the new season underway and all the Hawkisms that, you know, still play in our heads time and again. Look, through 9 games, you give me a 6-3 record, knowing that Dylan Cease has been fantastic and that the arm strength and the innings count, because that's what you're watching. Like, certainly bullpens became, in the last 20 years, far more important, right? Needing to figure out where you can steal a day and not burn too many of them. And so, you know, for Tony La Russa, that's one of the big tasks, at least for the first month or two, because of the shortened preseason and spring training. You assume guys were still doing their work, but you had a guy even as, you know, diligent on things on the national scale, and certainly being here in Los Angeles, Clayton Kershaw, after being pulled, you know, in that perfect game scenario, was kind of talking about workloads and what he did or didn't do, and he was kind of nebulous about it. But what he would have normally been doing in January because of an unknown labor situation, maybe guys weren't going full into their normal off-season training. And man-to-man, you might get that nobody's offering that out in the public sphere.
What do you make of that Clayton Kershaw situation? I thought he should have finished it.
I'm not surprised because that's what the Dodgers do, right? Dave Roberts has now done it a couple times. And I guarantee you, as a former player and a guy that played and won at the highest level as he did, that's not his individual call, right? That's an organizational, because that's one of the knocks on Roberts, despite all the success that he's had, is that there is that organizational top-down line of thinking of here's the analytics and here's how we do things. For years, obviously, what people have watched with the Cubs, right? And certainly with the White Sox, trying to figure out where that art and science kind of thing comes together here with Tony La Russa and the way baseball is managed in 2022. For Clayton Kershaw, I mean, he's got his World Series, right? That's in the books. You've got all the Cy Youngs, you've got all the accolades. How many chances at that are you going to have?
Not many.
He might have said all the right things corporate-wise that day. The following day, he was on a fence and kind of doing a tap dance. A month from now, he may regret it, right? Folks say, well, what's the value of it now? It's like, well, the value of it is he's a guy that's going to the Hall of Fame. It would be the 24th in history. And look, you take your shot. Even if you just bring him out for the 8th and go batter to batter, see how many pitches it takes, see how he's feeling. Might have lost at the first pitch he threw. For folks that were upset and angry, kind of go into the larger, all right, well, we need him in October. It's like, how's not pitching the 8th or 9th guaranteeing that his back doesn't flare up, his shoulder doesn't fly into the third deck, his elbow doesn't, go down the first base line as he follows through. I mean, all of these things, the assumption of, saving it for good. That's what my mom used to say all the time. I don't know if you're familiar, right? Southside Chicago. My mom, we'd give her nice things. Like my brothers and I, we'd hustle and trading card shows and paper routes and whatever and we'd go find a nice top or maybe, a t-shirt from a concert we went to or whatever, thinking she'd like it. And we'd always get the line, I'm saving it for good. It's like, damn it, we're here today. All right. That good may never come. So it always sat in the back of the closet. We'd find these things that weren't worn, and then they were being donated. So somebody else got to use them. Hopefully they wore them in good health. But for my mom, it was a lot of things that went into these boxes that were saved for good. With Clayton Kershaw, that's exactly what they did. And they're going to hear about it for the rest of the season. And if he gets injured, it gets even louder because now you say, well, why didn't we? Why didn't we push? And that's the larger thing. And it's curious that, the first 2 weeks of the season, we've certainly had plenty of storylines, which is great for Major League Baseball to get folks excited other than, having to just build out a big scorecard of where you can find a game.
You know what this reminds me of? Johan Santana, 2013, the no-hitter. So the Mets kept him in, and he threw 130 pitches, got the no-hitter. Then he got hurt. He was never the same after that game. I feel like there was a precedent shift because everybody saw what happened to Santana. Do you agree with that, or what do you think?
It's outliers, right? We'll get into football contracts and all that fun stuff in a minute. But it's also 130 pitches. Kershaw was still pretty on his game, right? He was saying his curveball might not have been as sharp. And that I'll let others, debate those and go through and pull all the charts and dips and whatever else. But he was at 80 pitches. And I'm young enough to embrace analytics and all that. I'm old school enough to know that 80 pitches should not be a breaking point for a pitcher. I don't care if it's April 5th. I don't care if it's September 15th. If you're at 80 pitches and you're a professional athlete, 80 pitches should not be where your arm is. I'm done. Unless you're a closer, or I can't wait to see what happens with Hunter Green throwing 38, 100-mile-an-hour pitches in a game. That's a whole other, modern Marvel meta-human kind of thing that we'll be monitoring. But I don't understand it. Like I don't. And just because I saw all the Santana quotes and pictures and whatever else, like that's 130. That's 130 hard innings, right? Kershaw was breezing. Santana had to work a lot of counts and hard pitches. We always talk about stressful minutes on basketball courts or, possessions in football games and one meaning more than another. Same thing here. Kershaw was dealing. So it seemed like the fluidity was there. And they're still a week and a half later. It's a big deal here in Los Angeles. It's been brought up on almost every show.
Mike Harmon here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mike, let's talk some Bears now. What was your reaction to their hirings at head coach and GM?
I like being bold, right? Obviously, it was time for a new voice, time for a change. I like that Eberflus, from all reports in day one, as everybody hit the buildings, he was in the offensive meetings, right? And that he wants to be hands-on. Everybody that you talk to that knew him from his time in Indianapolis raves about the mind. Likewise in the front office, right? But you got to exhibit patience, right? Everybody wants spend. I mean, you don't want to be the Jaguars. You want activity, right? And you want to be judicious, because this allows me to do my quick Christian Kirk rant to just shut everybody up.
Go ahead, please.
Well, because he got paid a lot of money and the stats would not be commensurate of the contract, right? I mean, or vice versa. You get what I'm saying. Like, people are going, well, that's the bar for all these other young receivers. Like, no. It's like the Tom Brady contract, right? It's the outlier. It's the outlier, because everybody else is operating in this pool and in this reality. Just because the Jaguars had to overpay to try to bring someone to town, and then did it again and again and again, because that's who they are and that's who they have to be, doesn't mean you've got to be foolish with your money and your contracts as well. Likewise, going to anybody and saying, hey, can you give us the Tom Brady discount? Not everybody's married to Giselle and has played 20 years where they've banked without endorsements, without anything else, and not breaking the bank. He's still over $250 million in career earnings, and that's while always being cap friendly. No other quarterback is anywhere close to being that guy. Likewise with Christian Kirk. But I digress. The changes on defense, I think, are going to be the most interesting part of this, right? Fields, we don't know what we have there. And anybody claiming that they know based on a couple of series or a half of a game that you liked. Because, I mean, obviously he was put in a terrible position, and I like that he's already got the veteran quarterback politician in him. Were you put in a position to succeed? I don't know. Right? I mean, just I'm not touching it, right? I mean, what's the value in that, right? There's no value. And I like that even as a second-year guy, he gets that, right? Here's my team moving forward. And there's a lot of change, and certainly on the defensive side, getting a lot younger. Still a couple of those key components, but how that gels is gonna seal it all. I mean, we'll see in the draft. I mean, this is a draft when you're looking at wide receivers, you really would love to have a day one pick sitting there. So we'll see how creative they get.
What kind of reinforcement should they be targeting specifically in the draft? Wide receiver and offensive line, probably, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can never have enough linemen in today's day and age, particularly if you're going to have a guy that a big part of his game is going to be pushing things to the edge, right? You and I talked during the season after he'd taken over last year, and it's like, all right, if that's going to be part of the game, then you need 5 dancing bears that are going to get it. And I say that tongue in cheek, but I mean, that's the term that people use in talent evaluation all the time. If the guy's going to get to the edge, you better have guys that understand the movement, as opposed to, all right, we're just pass blocking as if Peyton Manning were standing back there as a statue, right? For Justin Fields, it's going to be a lot about extending plays. Ergo, when you go and add any more wide receivers, either guys that are still free agents now that maybe you can get a little cheaper than maybe they priced themselves going into the market, or we get into the draft where it is pretty deep this year, that, but a lot of it is just breaking containment and being patient and giving Justin Fields an opportunity to have that opportunity downfield, right? Big plays are going to be there, but not if he's consistently in a situation like he was in that Cleveland game, where, I mean, everybody that has ever watched a game of football said, this just isn't right. I was at, we've got a Geno's East that opened up in Sherman Oaks, right near my studio, right? So we go, all the hometown guys, pictures all over the wall, and a bunch of Bear fans. And I was there with a couple of folks that are not football fans. After 2 series, they looked at me and said, this isn't how an offense runs, right? I'm like, no, they have set this, they've put this poor man into a terrible situation. And that was very early in the game. And then it just got worse and worse. So I'm excited to see what he can be year two. But yeah, offensive line, always a priority. Wide receivers, go find a game changer. I love Darnell Mooney. That's a good spot. We need to figure out what Cole Kmet is. Because I don't think we know. I mean, you watch as closely, or you talk to a lot of folks. Does anybody stand for him at a high level? There's
Not
still
at all.
a lot of wishing and hoping, but not a lot of decisive, this is who he is. Because 60 catches, 600 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Your tight end has to be a red zone threat. And I know the Bears didn't have a lot of red zone, anything a year ago, but you had that. And you've got a backfield that's interesting. Darrington Evans never really got a chance, couldn't stay healthy either. So that kind of plays together. But Herbert showed you he can play. Montgomery, when he's healthy, can play. But again, goes back to the 5 guys up front and whether you can get a consistent push. Because the division potentially is there. Right? I mean, it's going to be cannibalism this year. Because I don't think the Packers are that team anymore. Maybe they are. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a bum slayer and has been for years, right? Feasting on the NFC North. On paper, the Vikings are the best. On paper, I think, at least in my opinion. But what's the new coaching staff and regime there? And can you coax big games out of Kirk Cousins? There's the billion-dollar question. And Detroit's Detroit.
Mike Harmon here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mike, let me ask you this. What do you make of the rumor that the Bears are not committed to Justin Fields?
Filling column inches in an offseason. I mean, there's been an awful lot of change in that building to try to say, yeah, we are. Right? I mean, turning over a lot of roster, turning over a lot of decision makers, coaches, all of that. I think they realized after watching Matt Nagy for a couple of years, because look, you and I have talked a bunch of times, and I know folks, many people were not. I'm still a Trubisky truther, I guess, if you're going to put it in, and grab some of the geopolitical world into it. It's I think he was a better quarterback than he got credit for. And the fact that Allen Robinson, and you and I talked about it, we can go find the clip from last year that I thought he shut it down. And he's more or less confirmed that all off season that he was done with the Matt Nagy era. That's a pretty big deal, right? Pretty big indictment. A guy who has performed in Jacksonville, gave you big numbers, more or less said, you know what, I'm done with this. This is a waste of, I'm not getting myself killed for this. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it just to that point of you have a new voice. And I don't know that Justin Fields can erase whatever bad habits he may have picked up, right? That's one of the things all right, it was only 1 year. So you hope that you can erase the stagnant offense that existed. And the fact that he goes back to Kansas City, I don't get it, but you know what? Good for him. He's on to his next path. But for the Bears, it was clearly done. But Trubisky got them to the playoffs twice. And you can argue the defense did their thing, and they did. But it has to work in concert. And last year was disjointed and painful as any season that any Bears fan. I mean, and you're young, so you're still, but you've got, the middle-aged guys' angst when it comes to this team because you live and die with it. I see it in your face. But it's just for Justin Fields now, it's time to move forward, and what they'll do in the next 9 days ahead of the draft. And during those 3 days is going to tell you an awful lot of where they want to put their stock and trade for the 2022 season. And I got to believe there's an awful lot of help coming on the offensive side.
Are you at all worried about the fact that he's going to have to learn a new offense and pretty much break the bad habits for Matt Nagy? I kind of look at this like a Josh Rosen situation, right? Josh Rosen, rookie head coach, obviously didn't work out, and maybe he doesn't have the talent that Justin Fields has, but at the end of the day, bad coach, and that really set him back for the rest of his career. Do you think anything to that extent could happen to Fields, or do you think he can overcome this?
Well, with Rosen, there was always a question, even coming out of UCLA, about who he was as a worker, right? Talent was there, but who he was and his love. I hate the love of the game, but that's where we're at, right? We're talking about it with Thibodeau, right, at the top.
Right.
the draft this year, right? Coming out of Oregon, because he's got all sorts of other things going on. Does he love the game? With Josh Rosen going back to hot tubs and everything else at UCLA, it was, does he love this? And look, Steve Wilkes is now part of the Flores lawsuit, right? And he got screwed, right? But we understand how business works and anything. Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, you thought it was, well, you had to link them together if you could, so they did. And unfortunately, he's the guy that ends up going out of town. But defensive coach, and also dealing with a guy coming in, not a lot of opportunity. You had Larry Fitzgerald and a bunch of guys, and Fitzgerald was towards his end. His patience for the next guy might not have been to the same level, and he does a lot of press, and we'll see, eventually maybe you get more out of that. But with Rosen, did he ever really get a true fair shot? I don't know. But there was still that background that was there. With Justin Fields, we don't have that background, right? At least from all appearances, as we've seen, this is a guy that wants to work, right? He's in the building first day, ready to lead, answering all the tough questions about what his rookie year was. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to be able to break through that, and that this staff is going to be supportive, right? With Matt Nagy, did he really, other than standing for Andy Dalton every chance he got, did he really seem like he was supporting anybody else and propping anybody else up in that building? I think that was one of the biggest failures. And it's something I bring up on our national show on Fox Sports Radio quite a bit, of how inept and pathetic a lot of the coaches, GMs, and even quarterbacks are in front of a microphone, right? You're leaders of a multi-billion-dollar franchise, regardless, all the way down to Jacksonville, right? They're multi-billion-dollar franchises across, and you're the faces of them, the head coach, your GM, and your quarterback. The number of quarterbacks that now 3 or 4 words, not really an explanation. You don't have to give away the farm, but people, look, you could say they're not paying your salary. They broadcast partners pay money because people are watching, and advertisers spend because people are watching, right? It still comes back to the base consumer, even if you want to dismiss ticket sales or whatever else. It's like, so while they don't, you shouldn't give them everything in terms of how a game plan worked, didn't work, whatever. You got to feed him a little bit something. With Nagy, he lost every press conference he ever walked into. And it was a pass the buck. I don't know, golly gee whiz, aw shucks, we lost another one kind of feel every Monday, right? And you knew it was coming. No matter how close a game was or how poor it was, the answers were going to be the same. And at no point was he really going to prop up any portion of that squad to where you felt he was leading a locker room. And I get a very distinct, I think there has been a line of demarcation, and with the new regime into the suits and everything, that you have a different feel of, this is what we're trying to do. We're bringing in guys that are going to fit what we do, and this is how we're building. You're going to have to work. That's the bottom line, right? Bucky Brooks and I do a Sunday morning show, right? Scout in the league, works at NFL Network. He goes, what do you hear? Consistent. You're going to come in here and you're going to work. If you don't fit the profile of that, we're not bending you in. You're either in or you'll be somewhere else. And I like that there looks to be that straight line approach. And I think Justin Fields will thrive in such.
What do you expect out of the Bears next year?
I don't know. I got to wait till mid-May when that schedule comes out, right? Because then we can pick all the games. No, we obviously know all the opponents. But look, it's all steps, right? Like now it's going from A to B and then B to C, right? We're down off a miserable season that we watched game after game, a lot of wishing and hoping, and then the inevitable tail at the end of a game, right? Some great performances, right? We talk about some of the pressures that we saw when you're looking at Smith and Quinn. Cool. Hopefully they can match what they did and the rest rises up, right? You made a big move in sending Khalil Mack away. You got to see something on the field to that because people like star power and name recognition and whatever. So it's got to be replaced. So obviously, step one is you want to say you're at the back end of the playoffs again. That's a goal, but certainly a 500 record, is that great? No. But I think given the era that just ended, even with a couple of playoff appearances and stipulate to that, nobody ever felt great about the squad. The hope is here that even at a 500 record, that Justin Fields gives you enough to believe that you're pushing in the right direction. And I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll definitely see where that direction heads as they finish constructing the squad.
Mike Harmon, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Mike, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, the White Sox and the World Series hope. So if they make it, are you going to be in person, or how do you plan to celebrate?
Oh, we'll find our way there. Oh, yeah. Between my brothers and I look, man, I've been waiting since 2005 again. Come on now.
What do you plan on doing?
I got back there for game 2 of that series, right? Obviously the Grand Slam and all of that. And I go and hug Paul Konerko's statue every chance I get. At one point, my producer from my show got him to record a birthday message for me. And then I think he pretty much told my producer to lose his number, which is kind of funny. But either way, it was good. But I always get back, and I remember that distinctly because I was doing a lot of radio hits for the job I was doing at that point, a lot of fantasy football, and I had to cancel several days because I had zero voice by the time I finished that game. But yeah, wherever that happens to be, obviously get home for a game or two, possibly. The beauty of this remote work thing, right, with these Comrex units, I can now go everywhere. Back in the day, it was, all right, we need you in a studio. Now I just need to find somebody's home with a fast enough wireless or wire connection and router that I can get in, right? So I'll have to have them up their internet speed for a month, and I'll have to pay the difference. But and then obviously, look, selfishly for our network and for a lot of friends and people that are part of my life out here, I would love to see a 59 series revisited, right? Still have some folks creeping around that were there and those hallowed games, but Dodger Stadium, White Sox fans invading from the 108, I think we could have some fun with that.
When's the last time you've been in studio?
I didn't even show you. Come on.
Oh.
We got our new merch. It arrived just in time. It was on my doorstep when I got home from my show last night. So there you go. Little Lewis Robert. I don't know. I like the characterization. It's pretty good.
Yeah, perfect for the show today and for the recording.
You got to show love to the hometown. Right. I got a plethora of hats, bunch of jerseys in the closet. We got a little bit of everything, a little bit of style. We got the stair climber behind me. So I got to get my work in, because if I'm going to come home, I'll put 15 pounds on, because I'll be rating all of my favorite food.
They're going to ask you, when's the last time you've been in studio for Fox Sports Radio?
I go in every Sunday.
Okay.
So part of it is guys that I'm working with, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. It's a hard overnight schedule. They need a little jolt towards the end of the shift to be in your face and animated, right? So like your technical producer and your producer in studio, everybody gets together. And it's easier. Like when I'm working with Smith, I do it 5 nights a week and have for now almost 9 years. So there's a cadence, there's a comfort. I don't need to see his mug every day. Now the studios have reopened, right? We had for a long time, it was, all right, if you need to come in, and certainly some folks, right, if we're on our weekend schedule, they're only in for a couple hours, but it was, here's the list of all the things you need to do, masks, etc., and everything else. Some of those have now lifted for the weeknight show. Look, I'm not doing that drive if I don't have to. And the show, I think, still sounds great. And right now, they're not forcing me back. It's an hour and a half commute each, like one way.
Wow.
Coming back at night, I get off late enough that unless there's construction or whatever, it's only about 35 minutes. But I've legitimately gotten near to 10 hours of my life back every week by not having to drive to the studio. But I do go in every couple of weeks. And if Jason takes a night off, I go in to check in on the guys. We usually order pizza from Gino's or have something brought in, and we get to commiserate. They get to complain about whatever's going on in their respective lives. I say, just put the Sox game on and I'm happy. And we move on. It's a beautiful thing. But but there's nothing, as you know, like live studio, people buzzing around. It's a different environment, and it was even pre-COVID, right? Because in our building for a long time, we had Nikki Sixx of Motley Crue had a studio right at the end of our hallway. So like legitimately, you could be in doing show prep, talking about stories, and all of a sudden you'd see a couple of people whiz by and you're looking going, I think, okay. And then all of a sudden you'd have someone come in and sit in. It's like, hey, they asked if they can come sit in for a segment. Is that cool? It's like, it's Duff McKagan. Yeah, sit. Right? Slash, whoever. Guys are wandering the hallway. I once helped Marilyn Manson get a cup of coffee. Obviously, he's in different circumstances now, and there's a lot more to that. But at the time, he's like you had rock stars walking through, because Nicky not only did the radio show and obviously readying for another tour with Motley Crue, but he's a big photographer. So he had these thrones and lighting and this all, like he'd get these great photos, and they'd show up in all sorts of magazines and be like, wow, who shot those? Like, yeah, that's down the hall from us. So, it's just different there, right? You don't have that same buzz. Steve Harvey's people and his show worked out of our studios, and He was in every couple of weeks. He'd be in for a couple of days. So like, it was different, because all of a sudden you see a Maybach parked in one of the big front spots. You're like, whoa. And then you didn't get too close because there was a security guard to make sure you didn't get too close. But still, Reverend Jesse Jackson is out here for his radio show quite frequently out of one of our buildings. I used to run into him all the time. So I missed that kind of feel, right? Because it was the world was coming in. But we've got a hot yoga place that you should come and visit sometime. Meet a lot of young Hollywood people, men and women, that are going in and out. Some of whom know our show. And it's like, hey, that guy's going to be on in like 45 minutes. Like, all right. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, it's a different world. But I try to get in as often as I can, because I think you need that human interaction. And I think it makes for the nice spontaneity of what a live radio show should be.
Mike, before we finish up today, last question. What's the most backlash you've received for an opinion of yours?
Well, the Rodgers bum slayer thing didn't sit well with a lot of people.
I think
just, the fun and exciting world of Twitter, which is why I laugh at it and say, tell your friends. The more you hate something I say, the better, right? Obviously, you have folks that try to inject, I want to infer that you said something of this, and certainly during the height of the Colin Kaepernick discussion several years ago, any opinion was going to be met with cries and anger of different things. Like, no, we got a couple of guys that are pretty vocal, but they're loyal listeners, so we appreciate the hell out of them. That defend basketball culture to the wall, and that we don't understand. It's like, no, they're playing basketball, and sometimes guys pop off in the media, like this Kyrie Irving thing gets people mad. But when it's all said and done, I try to come at it with some bit of logic. And if you listen to us long enough, you know that when we do go off to the hot take nonsense button, as I like to call it, there's usually a little bit of sarcasm dripping, because we know that that's going to get people riled up, right? I mean, it's theater of the mind is radio, right? You learn that in school, certainly, and working as you do each night. It's like part of it is building a story. And if folks want to make you the bad guy, that it makes them feel better about some other portion of their life, I'm willing to take that on. I got no problem. It's helped me have a nice, long, multi-decade career in this business at this point. I mean, look, the other is that, I still have, some love and reverence for the Bears career of Jay Cutler. I know you're Jay Cutler. Yeah, your frequent guest, Mike North, and I, we used to fight all the time when we were doing a show together, where he was the biggest Josh McCown stan. I was on the Jay Cutler, but look at the roster that's built around him. And again, decision makers, that's been a constant. But that's Chicago sports in a nutshell, isn't it? Save a couple years here and there. There's a lot of questionable moves that get made along the way. But yeah, I take it all in stride, right? I mean, look, the old rule of thumb, having done support early in my career at Yahoo, is you're going to get 100 blank U's for every one attaboy. right? And, folks watching and listening can think about their own jobs, right? How often does your boss walk by and say, yeah, that was really well handled? Versus, hey, you put the decimal, you didn't carry the one, right? Or, this customer says you rolled your eyes or whatever else. Like, you're going to get far more complaints than you are positivity. Fortunately, we've got bosses that when they hear us tackle something hard, they want to listen to how we approach it. And I think, Jason and I, we've developed, you're going to get an empathetic look at the world, right? Recognizing the humanity of the players. But guys do something dumb. Coach, player says something dumb. You're fair game. Doesn't take the humanity out of it, but in the moment, it is, let's talk about it for entertainment, right? Kyrie Irving flipping people off. I don't know. Embrace your inner villain, I guess, was his moment. Some folks, that take was a bridge too far. Well, he did it to the fans or whatever. Okay, fine. He's going to get fined $200,000 or whatever the maximum is for, $50,000 per infraction. Move on. Did I say he was a bad guy? No, I said he was human and he had his human moment. And if that makes him a bad guy in your eye, great. If that makes me a bad guy for saying I really didn't care, then okay, I'm a bad guy too, and I'm what's leading to the downfall of society. And I'll carry that torch. I might put that on a shirt. It's all my fault.
I'll buy that shirt.
Would you? Okay,
yeah.
I'll have my daughter come up with a cool, creative logo. We've got a couple of ideas in the hopper, but legit, right? I mean, obviously, it's a different environment than it was even 5 years ago. And you do, while you're not, I don't want to say choosing your words correctly, you do know the parameters of where you're joking. You don't get the same leeway, right? Because people will snip it off for those 2 seconds and say, look what he said. It's like, well, no, in the context, it built up to a good joke that was a one-liner. However, right, you decide you want to put it on Twitter, now I'm the bad guy. And so, yeah, I mean, we don't write our shows. Like, we know a lot of people that write 80% of what they do. Ours is watch, read, react. Jason may have a couple of quick notes to get something started, but then I react to what he says, which means sometimes you're going to get marble-mouthed. Sometimes there's going to be I don't know, especially if something just happened in a game, right? Or, some story that just broke as we're on air. But in the end, that's the fun of it, right? Being able to think on your feet. And once you get good at that, I mean, the world's your oyster, as they say. How's that for a 1950s phrase?
Perfect way to end the program. But Mike, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure to talk, and best wishes, of course, with the radio program on Fox Sports and everything else you're working on. Looking forward to the next time we chat too.
I can't wait till you hire me to do a job too, Jeff. I mean, that's coming soon enough, I'm sure. No, it's always a pleasure to sit down and talk to you, talk a little bit of hometown and the larger broadcasting world, because it's changing by the day.